So I wanted to talk about the best cosmetic system between World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, and Guild Wars 2. But I wanted to talk about it more from the standpoint of translating, because one of the things that's happened a lot over the last week is people have gotten to a point where now they know when Endwalker is in Final Fantasy, which is our expansion, that November 19th will be when they get access, and they've realized that maybe for them, there's not that much content that they want to get to in that time because they've finished everything that they want to finish, other than maybe a couple things that come into the game on May 25th, and they're going to gap out. I've seen people in World of Warcraft looking at the launch time of 9.1, and they're going to gap out. I've seen people in Guild Wars 2 realizing that End of Dragons is this journey. It's going to have some events along the way, but maybe for them, they're going to gap out. And so it's a great time to try one of the other games. And one of the things people continually bring up is cosmetics. How do cosmetics work? All three games have cosmetics that are both available in-game and available for extra purchase through their shop. World of Warcraft and Guild Wars both have the ability to convert your gold into the premium currency, assuming that you're a paying member of their community. Free trial members in both games don't have access to that, but that's a bigger swing at the way Guild Wars works for free, since it's a buy-to-play. And the games all have a system by which they manage it. So the first thing that I would say is, how easy is it to get? How much content grants it? And in all three games, the answer is a lot. All three games are going to have items you can craft, items you're going to find in dungeons, off of monsters, rewards from quests, rewards from achievements. All of these games are going to have a huge number of cosmetics in the game, and those cosmetics are going to be bound by the class that is appropriate. So you're only going to be able to equip things to your appropriate faction or race or profession, class, job, whatever. You're not going to have every single item equipable to every single character in the game. There are some items that are equipable to every character in the game, but not every item is. So in acquisition, all three games are basically tied. There's a couple of key differences in how often that loot drops. World of Warcraft and Guild Wars drop a ton of loot compared to Final Fantasy, but in trade, they share a lot of skins between loot. So you might get 3 or 4 or 5 different pieces of loot, stat-wise, that all share the same skin. In Final Fantasy, things are a little more unique, but the gearing system in general is simpler than the other two, because you don't really have the same stat priority that the other two do outside of the materia system, which is something different. So, dungeon loot in Final Fantasy is largely what's called bind on pickup, soulbound, market prohibited, whatever the term you want to use is, where it's non-tradable. And so that is something you're going to have to do. And so then the question becomes, once I receive loot and I have a skin, I make it mine. If I equip it, do I have that appearance forever? In both Guild Wars and World of Warcraft, the answer is yes. In Final Fantasy, the answer is no. In Final Fantasy, you actually put items in your Glamour dresser. It has 400 slots. You can keep items in other inventories to swap out with that, but for simplicity's sake, you have 400 slots, and that's rotatable what you put in there. You build presets of different appearances that you look in all three games, but in Final Fantasy, you can only build 15 of them under a system called Glamour plates. And if you do the math, we have more than 15 jobs in the game, and that's before you talk about crafters and gatherers. And so very quickly you realize you can't even have a unique appearance for every way to play the game, much less multiple appearances. Now from there, the question becomes, well, how much variety is there? How much control do I have over the way my character really looks? In Final Fantasy and Guild Wars, this is vastly, vastly bigger than World of Warcraft's. World of Warcraft has restrictions on, they have in the past put restrictions on things like when you can equip seasonal gear. They have the game split into 2 factions, and so that, there's all of these restrictions, and 99% of the gear in the game feels like it looks like gear. You always kind of look like a warrior, with very rare exceptions, seasonal events, things, some of the crafted like tunics and stuff. And so outside of hiding those pieces so that you can focus on like your shirt slot, you typically are going to look like the class that you're playing more often than not. Final Fantasy, from World of Warcraft standpoint, almost gets mocked for just how diverse the cosmetic system really allows you to be. You can be in a dungeon. You could run a pre-made dungeon so you can mix and match the classes, and you could run 8 warriors and not know that any of them are warrior. You could have one in a bikini. You could have one in dead set warrior armor. You could have one in a stuffed pig suit. You could have one looking like they're dressed to go to school. You can have one in a suit. It can be all over the place. It's hugely wide. And Guild Wars has a number of those things as well. My character doesn't even look like the race they are anymore because of how dense their wardrobe system is. You have wardrobe, glamour, and transmog. They all effectively are going to be referring to the same cosmetics. From there, you add more variety by dyeing gear. Both World of Warcraft, or both Final Fantasy and Guild Wars are going to allow you to dye gear, and Final Fantasy is going to use that dye as a consumable. Guild Wars is going to have that dye as an unlockable preset, closer to something like a racing game, where once you have that set of paints or whatever, you can apply it an unlimited number of times to cars. And so you can just keep pulling out of that vial of dye. And so unlocking the dyes is incredibly valuable in Guild Wars, because then you have that color forever and ever and ever. And there's a number of ways to do that. World of Warcraft doesn't have that. If you want a different skin of the same item, then you need to go look at what other items are using the same model and are changing that color for you. As far as the quality goes of how it looks, all of these games are going to have armor that looks like when it was implemented into the game. And so World of Warcraft, in my opinion, has come the furthest in their graphic styles. And so it is possible to equip an item that has a skin that was made in 2004. And if you equip that cloak on top of maybe something that was added this year, there's going to be a drastic difference in kind of the polygon count and the resolution. And so it's not going to look as good as the current stuff. So just keep that in mind. It's not about like, oh, how many are there? Now, the next thing is like, okay, well, how easy is it to see what I'm missing and how I'm collecting? Well, World of Warcraft really comes out super on top here because you open it up and you can see where everything is sourced from. Guild Wars is right behind it. Both of them have an achievement style window. In Final Fantasy, I would most similarly equate it to the way Orchestron scrolls are tracked, where you can see the ones you both own and the ones you don't own. And when you click on the ones you don't own, it's going to give you a hint or direct explanation of where you can acquire it. Keep in mind that because these skins are shared with multiple items, especially in World of Warcraft, sometimes that's just where that's one drop for it, but there's another drop somewhere else. And so something like an add-on like All the Things can make that a little easier to track, especially when you go into the settings and you say, hey, I just want, as soon as I have one of these appearances, I don't need any others. That's a much more casual way to go about getting all the appearances. And so you really can focus on things that are going to truly unlock a new skin for you and aren't just going to be an item that you've never received before. So with all of that said, that's a pretty nutshell grab at kind of just translating, like, in a core way, what these cosmetic systems are doing. They are drastically different, but they are all aiming for the same goal. All of them are taking theme park MMORPGs where you're doing a series of things that are either old content, new content, seasonal content, current tier, pushing forward, and they're all with the goal of just making your character look cooler. They are entirely optional. They run alongside having, in games have mini pets or have different skins for mounts. Guild Wars has the most unique mounts system because they're not just skins. Actually, a huge difference between the mounts is the way mounts actually perform. World of Warcraft kind of used to have stuff like that and still does a little bit. Final Fantasy really doesn't. All mounts are virtually identical outside of how many people they can hold. And so the cosmetic system here is a huge draw to a game. It means a lot. It's a character you spend a lot of hours staring at, and so having the ability to make it look really cool and be something you're proud of and be something representative of what you've earned and what you've worked towards is something that people really do attach to. And it's one of the values of these games, especially if you take breaks, because when you come back and you log in, your cosmetics are exactly where you left them. It's why jumps from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2, Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, Destiny 2 sunsetting things. It's why these things are controversial, is your cosmetics are something you want to care for. It's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons I think that there hasn't been a WoW 2 is that they have the advantage of characters being invested in 15 years of cosmetics. And so it makes people want to keep playing and have all this cool stuff, and they feel invested into that character, and a restart would give them an opportunity to go, do I want to keep playing WoW, or would I rather start something different? Because it's all the same, I'm starting from scratch. And so when you see somebody who gets banned, whether they deserve it or not, and they lose their character forever and ever, that's commonly a time that somebody goes, well, I'm not going back to that game, even though it's technically all cosmetic, because the catch-up mechanics are going to get you geared out relatively quickly compared to 15 years. So technically they could get right back where they are, But the cosmetics are something that people take very seriously. So it's a common thing for people to come in and mention. It's a common thing for people to be really interested in how it works between these games, and it's come up a lot this week. So I just wanted to sit down and kind of translate Guild Wars 2 versus Final Fantasy versus World of Warcraft. Overall, I think when it comes to variety, Guild Wars 2 and Final Fantasy do the best job between the dyes and the sheer depth, or more than depth, like full broad shenanigans that you can look like. I think that they have the most variety. And then when it comes to the UI, I think Guild Wars and World of Warcraft have it right, making it something that I can track like achievements, I can acquire all of. Even if I don't care how something looks, I can go get that appearance because it finishes out a set or a collection or an achievement, as opposed to Final Fantasy. If you're not going to use that item cosmetically, maybe you don't really feel the need to go after it. And so that's kind of cool because it helps completionists get involved in that system, even if they don't really feel like the cosmetics they're chasing are something they're actually going to use on their character. And obviously out of that Venn diagram, you're noticing Guild Wars tends to rise to the top. So when people come in from WoW into my 14 streams and say, is it better? It's like, well, they're really just different. They both do things well. They both do things poorly. If you want one that's kind of showing them both up, I would look at Guild Wars, which actually is just taking the strengths of both systems and is really showing them both up in this one aspect of a game. Don't get me wrong, all three games have their strengths. I just think when it comes to cosmetics, Guild Wars has really knocked it out of the park. So on that note, this was just a chance to talk about cosmetics, possibly the most optional of content in games. Jokingly called the real in-game, but truly something you never have to engage in until you want to, and only to the degree you want to, at the pace you want to. Which makes it a great example of me just talking about gaming, kinda.